Hello, my friends. My name is Tim Little. I am a nighttime landscape artist living on the East Coast of Massachusetts, and this is One Shot at Cape Cod After Dark. This is a web series in which each episode is devoted to talking about one image from my portfolio. I'm going to give you the story behind the moment, the settings that I used, and some of the decisions that worked to get all of this to come together. So I think it would be a great idea for the first episode for us to look at an image that hopefully will inspire a momentary feeling of peace and calm. And this was a shot that I took back in 2017, and I've aptly named it Ethereal. So this is the one we're going to be talking about this evening. If you have any questions about it, please let me know in the comments, and I am going to be happy to answer those. Let me give you a little bit of background on how this all came about. So I was driving home from a trip off Cape, and as I came over the bridge, over the Bourne Bridge, and looking down on the canal, I could see this really low-level fog. And I immediately thought, wow, we've got moonlight, we've got fog, there's probably some good potential here. I'm going to take a quick drive down to the Vineyard Sound area in Falmouth along Surf Drive and just give it a quick survey. Sure enough, the conditions were amazing. They were absolutely fantastic to get something unique. So I ran home real quick because, of course, the best opportunities happen when you don't have your camera equipment. And then I raced back to this spot, and thankfully, nothing had changed other than the position of the moon, and it really didn't matter in that aspect too much. So I got out there, and what I noticed right away was this really rare level of fog. Normally, when it gets foggy on the Cape, you get this big haze that encompasses everything. Here, the fog was maybe about 100 feet offshore and only maybe about the same altitude as the typical tree line, so 30 or 40 feet. So I had a clear shot to the water, and then I had beautiful starry sky with moonlight right over the top of it. And then you had this amazing fog bank that more or less deleted the horizon. In that view, I would normally have seen Martha's Vineyard. I would have seen the lights of Martha's Vineyard. That whole stretch of shoreline really is the same view. And you'd get the occasional boats and ferries going back and forth and all that kind of activity. But for tonight, it really felt like I was standing on the edge of the earth, so to speak. I walked out onto a rock jetty in order to get this particular shot. And while I was out there, the fog behind me had filled in just a tad. So out of any night that I think I've shot anywhere, even being out by myself, way out somewheres, whether it be here or out west, this night in particular, I really felt like it was just me on the earth. It was after midnight at this point. There were no cars or traffic around. This was in the spring, so it wasn't all that busy. There was no one in the parking lot where I had parked. I couldn't see the houses across the street because of the way the fog had filled in. All I could see was this moonlight scene over the top of me. So I thought this is absolutely fantastic. And what my goal was here was to convey to you, the viewer, what I was feeling. I think when you're a photographer or just an artist in general, one of the hardest things to do is to try to convey what it is that you're feeling in that moment to the person who's viewing your art later. So being able to do that under the right conditions, I feel like is rare sometimes. But in this case, I think it all came together. When you shoot this kind of work, you really want to create sort of this, dreamy, smooth sort of look. And that's possible thanks to doing long exposure work. Here, I knew that I wanted everything to look smoothed out. I wanted the water to look nice and smooth. I wanted any patterns in the fog or any changes in the fog to smooth out so that when you looked at this image, you ended up with this feeling of serenity and that dreamlike state. This exposure was about 3 minutes long. With night work, it's possible, especially in a moonlit environment like this, it's actually possible to overexpose an image. In fact, if I didn't tell you this was at night, you probably would think this was maybe 10 in the morning on the Cape. Now, I do try to leave some clues. In this particular case, the moon was still overhead a little bit, so you couldn't really see it. But if you look more towards the top of the image, let's say off to the right and along the Along the very edge, you'll see 2 stars right there. So that's the clue, if you know where to look, to see that there are some nighttime elements. Also look off to the upper left and you'll see stars there. Normally, I'd have that horizon with the lights, and that would tell you it was nighttime. If you're going to do long exposure work like this, you have to make sure that you don't overpower the camera with the light. Overbake it, as we would call. So if you're a photographer, you know that exposure triangle. So you've got your time and your aperture and your ISO. It's all a balancing act. When I'm doing long exposures like this, I have to kind of diminish the amount of light from the other settings so that time does all the heavy lifting. In my brain, I kind of imagine it as a seesaw, let's say. So you have the heavy weight of time going by, 2 or 3 minutes to smooth everything out. And then on the other side, you've got ISO and aperture. So I lower my ISO very low, around 400 ISO, and my aperture is around f8 here. So that squeezes down the amount of light coming in, and the ISO reduces the sensitivity. And now time just brings all that nice light in for me. I was doing a photography talk back in, I think it was the spring of last year, and someone asked me why I chose to position the pier the way that I did here. Now, of course, I don't have any control as to how the pier is set up. Like it's there, but how you elevate your camera will depend on how it aligns with the horizon. I got the impression that the question might have been a critique because then it was followed with a, why wouldn't you make it more in line with the horizon? And that's fine. You know, art and photography are eye of the beholder. And it's really what the artist wants to get out of it. I'm going to be the first person in most circumstances to tell you what I would do in a circumstance, but I'm never going to tell you you're wrong because it's your eye. And that's one of the tough things about shooting with people sometimes is they're so used to other people telling them they didn't do it right that there's a confidence level that kind of goes away. And you really should shoot for you and enjoy the art that you create for yourself. And if you get better through your own means, that's great. But if you like it, that's all that matters. Okay, that's my soapbox. But in this particular case, I really wanted to make sure that I didn't align the horizon with the pier. The pier, if it met the horizon line, would make the image feel a little bit flat to me. So if I had lowered my tripod, that would have lined up and the horizon line would have touched the pier, and I didn't want that to happen. You've probably heard of the rule of thirds, and the rule of thirds isn't just right, center, left. It's also foreground, midground, background. And so I have 2 dimensions of the rule of thirds happening here. I have my subject, my focal point, a little off to the side in that third to the left. But then I also have the depth of it. So I've got my pier in the foreground with the water, then I've got the fog, and then I've got the sky. So that was my compositional idea behind this shot. I couldn't actually go any higher with my tripod. This is as high as it was going to go anyway. I think I would have liked to give it another 6 inches or so just to bring the pier down a little bit further into the water, but I'm happy with how this turned out. The last question I get is, why black and white? You know, dealer's choice on that one. I use black and white very rarely. More often, I use it to offset very bright orange sodium vapor light environments. We still have a lot of areas that use those older style street lights. Those are those really orange ones, and they can make an otherwise good image look just very muddy. And there's not really a white balance level you can apply that brings that down to a level that looks okay. And so flipping the black and white switch works pretty well. This shot, the overall tones were strictly blue and white. And that gave it more of a daytime appearance to me than I would have liked. And that's why I converted it over to black and white. In my mind, I think that was the best choice for this shot. Now, to give you an example of what another image from this shoot looked like, I'll show you. I didn't convert over to black and white. It's this one here. This was shot right down the road under the same conditions. Same fog bank. This one I included the moonlight in. You can see there's a couple stars just off to the left of the moon and then a little ways off to the right. And this has more of a daytime feel for me than maybe I would like, but I didn't love it in black and white as much as I liked the other one in black and white. So if you decide for whatever the reason you want to convert over to that, there might be reasons that make sense from a technical standpoint. And there might just be visual reasons that just make you feel better. And I think for me, that was probably the case. So if you have any questions on this image that you have just seen, anything I talked about related to the image, I would love to answer them for you. Please feel free to leave that question in the comments below, and I will get an answer to you. And if you have a suggestion on a photo that you'd like to hear more about, please do not hesitate to let me know in the comments as well. I will add it to the list. I hope you enjoyed this moment of peace, and I will see you in the next episode. Hey, if you liked this video, please consider subscribing to the channel and clicking the bell to be notified of future episode content. Thanks for watching.